Hi everyone. I assume I can be audible because I spoke to you guys just now, starting my speech now. So the first question I'm going to answer is what this debate is about. We will say that as per the Infoslide and the motion, the biggest difference in this debate is the way you view yourself. That is to say, in an adversarial model of being a lawyer, you view yourself as doing law for your client and yourself, while as a moral activist, you do law for social justice. Note that the Infoslide allows us to say that we are doing things within the law, meaning that on either side of the house, do we fabricate evidence and be a zealous in the religious sense? Zealous is a term that lawyers actually use to refer to the idea that you will do it as far as the law allows you to do. That's a norm in the legal profession. You all should understand that. What then are the biggest differences on both sides of the house in terms of actual behavior? We will say that the biggest difference is just where you actually practice law. In a world where you view yourself as practicing law for your client, this allows you to just select clients regardless of how moral or immoral they are. This probably then means that you go towards large corporations and go into big law and go into corporate law, for example, and go into corporate law firms. We're quite comfortable with that. In the comparative, viewing yourself as a moral activist means that you have to select clients based on how much morality how moral they are as actors. This then means that you are selecting for law clinics which provide, for example, law consulting to disenfranchised communities. You might be a public defender, or you might select for law firms that deliberately cater to low income clients. To be clear, we don't have to go for the most morally abhorrent clients. So, for example, we don't have to go and represent like a police officer who's shot at black people. Obviously, we just cannot choose not to do that. There are way more corporations out there. We are probably going to end up in somewhere that's morally neutral but pretty profitable. Something like contract law, which Ritu is going into. All of these things will make her lots of money while still not making her the most morally abhorrent person in the world, though she's no saint either, I can really. Arguments then in this speech. Firstly, why this is in your and your family's self-interest and why you should care about that. Secondly, why this is actually the best way to do good for society. Firstly, then why this is in your and your family's best interest. We will say that being willing to care primarily for your client's interest allows you to opt into significantly better paying and more comfortable jobs. Number one, it is better paying because the people you represent have money and can therefore pay. When you're representing moral clients, they usually, it's a moral thing to represent them because they just don't have the money to hire a big shot lawyer, and therefore you're doing a moral and social good by doing these things for them. And if you're representing social justice causes, usually people need to be represented because they are in a disadvantaged position in society, meaning they have very little capital to begin with. And crucially, you're often then going to firms that they just pay you way, way more, right? Like your corporate lawyer salaries, number one. Number two, you probably get a good amount of prestige and happiness from these firms. This is because you get social prestige from being able to see you as a skilled and capable lawyer. You see the respect of people around you. Will tell you that you get happiness and fulfillment from doing social good. We will say maybe initially, but when you surround yourself with people who are symmetrically moral as moral as you inevitably compare. You're in an environment where being moral is no longer special or unique. It is the norm. And crucially, there's always going to be someone who's more moral than you, more willing to burn the midnight oil, more willing to burn themselves out. And the standard of what constitutes a moral person changes when you go into those environments, when these are people who are more purist, more demanding, and can always ask for more from you. Therefore, there are infinite numbers of cases that they can ask from you for, but that you are always going to have to feel to be more moral. Well, therefore, you highlight the things you don't do, or the things you do, we will say doesn't make you feel all that moral. How should you weigh this material? When you get more pay, more social prestige, a better position in a corporate law firm, this allows you to fulfill your own self-interest. This means that you're able to get a better house for yourself, a better life for yourself. We would say that we would engage in some random speculative material about human nature and how most people are selfish, but I will actually go specifically into minorities, right? Oftentimes, minorities grow up in working class environments, meaning that in order to survive, working class families often have to look out for number one. The more money you give away, donate, spend, the less likely you are to be able to ensure a roof over your head. And if you want your kid to be a lawyer, to a certain extent, you have to prioritize that kid over other families. This means you're probably socialized into an environment which does prioritize being selfish, because that's how you got to the position of being a lawyer, despite being a minority, who on average, for example, black people have 10 times less wealth, Asian people as well, unfortunately, in many communities, especially if they're immigrants, for example. But more importantly, it allows you to discharge your more proximate moral obligations to your family. You can make rent and make sure that your kids have a place to sleep, food on the table, a good education, a university degree to ensure them a comfortable life. You can ensure your spouse is comfortable, has health insurance coverage. You can ensure your parents are comfortable and well fed. To be clear, if you're a minority person who became a lawyer, odds are they sacrifice a lot for you. They probably pulled together resources, time. Your dad and mom sat you down in front of the kitchen table and forced you to get good at school. Therefore, you have a massive obligation to repay all of these things that they provided to you. You also probably took out student loans, which you are also economically obligated to pay as a result. Obviously, Ob will say you have an obligation to your community as a whole, or a nebulous idea of the community, and maybe this will indirectly affect your family. I have 3 pieces of weighing that will do the trade-off for you right now. Number 1, these are sets of people who are more proximate to you. You see it and feel it when you give them the food, shelter, and water. But helping the community is way too indirect. And the trickle-down effects of that to your family or to anyone else are just not seen by you when you set a precedence, because you don't know how that precedent will be used 10, 20 years down the line. But when you give food to your child now, you know that they're happy. You know that they're fulfilled. They thank you. They look you in the eyes and thank you. And when you cannot make rent, when you cannot comfort them, you feel the guilt because you see it in your child's eye that you're not giving them a good life. But more importantly, it's a more certain impact. Being a small guy against more powerful social forces means that you're always against overwhelmingly odds. You are likely to lose the majority of your cases because you're just less well-financed, you just have less time, energy, and money to spend as compared to the other guy who probably is a large corporation with big shot lawyers who are now using those resources against you. This then means that you're likely to lose a majority of your cases because that is just how it is when you're a small guy representing against a big one. And you're engaging in long fights against nebulous social forces that you never see the benefits of. CO.
Why are you likely to succeed as a lawyer if you're always discriminated by your bosses and clients?
So to be clear, oftentimes law firms want minorities in positions of power. Number 1, helps their social image. This is something law firms care about. Number 2, it helps to engage with minority clients. Minorities are increasingly in positions of power. Number 3, oftentimes you can get there through like pure hard work, etc. Like that might have been true of like 1970s, but it's 2025. Law firms are becoming far more liberal as a result. Second question then on how we get more good for society. This first issue wins this debate independently, but I'll engage with that metrics anyway. We will suggest that being able to do good for society is something you can do later when you're already in a position of power, when you're already a partner, for example, or when you're a decently experienced senior lawyer. What does this mean? Number 1, you have more skills at that point because you've gotten more experience fighting out in court and you've been groomed by a law firm which has structural economic incentives to make you successful, rich, and powerful and capable. Number 2, you have more capital. You have more money saved in the bank account which you can then donate or spend, and you're not stressed when you do these cases. Number 3, you have more connections with judges, other powerful lawyers, you're part of the community. To be clear, this means that if we do good later, it's okay because we do way more good later in your life rather than trying to slug it out as a little guy working for a law clinic to begin with. To be clear, that then means that we're likely to get all these benefits of that you'll inevitably talk about later on. We get these things later, but we can get good for our family now. We get both of these things. We're able to then take this round. Thank you.
Thank you for that speech. And now I would like to invite the leader of opposition here.
Yep, I'll just start in 20 seconds. Thank you.
Sorry, LO seems to be speaking, but is muted. I'm just making sure they know this.
Yeah, I'm just speaking to my partner before he starts. No worries. Yeah.
Yep, hopefully I'm audible and visible.
Yes, you are.
Thank you. Starting my speech, my name is Dhruv, preferred pronouns he/him. I'll definitely take one POI from closing government after the 5th minute. Please don't verbalize before that. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1, and go. I want to start with some rebuttals directly to opening government. The first claim that they make is that probably these clients aren't going to be the worst in the world. Notice that when you're working for a big law firm, they defend a variety of clients. Some of them will be guilty, some of them won't be guilty. But the problem is, as an up-and-coming lawyer, you just don't have the bargaining power with your law firm to determine the cases that you're going to actually get to take part in the first place, right? Which means there's a lot of coercion which is involved, which means your law firm is going to give you cases, but you cannot deny taking those cases up, even if you think your client is someone who's just really, really guilty in the first place to begin with. This is very very, very bad, because often you'll have to defend guilty clients, but often this is going to take a big toll in terms of your psychology or in terms of the mental health that you have, because oftentimes you'll be defending the same people who are taking part in the discrimination, in the sexual harassment, in corruption, that you just don't want to defend, because these are the people who are also harming your communities or other minorities in the first place to begin with. Which means there's a level of coercion which is involved, which harms and ruins your quality of life every single day when you're working for this big firm that doesn't make you happy in the first place to begin with. But the second thing I want to talk about, and this is crucial, is that I just don't think money is the most important thing for this actor. I'll just give you more incentives later on for that to begin with. The claim that you get from Gov, and this is very, very smart, is that probably if I earn money, that gives me future capacity to do charity or to help my community later on. I'll just directly deal with this part of the claim right now to begin with. Notice, when you're actually defending clients who are guilty, you will only earn money or you will only get promotion when you successfully defend these clients to begin with, which means your success is dependent on the success of the guilty companies who are scamming more people, who are discriminating against more people in the first place to begin with, right? Which means you are complicit to the system on Gov side of the world. You might be earning more money, but you're also increasing the capacity for these companies to earn more money in their side of the world to begin with. Which means if you defend successfully a company which has committed corruption, they might feel like doing corruption is fine. They might keep doing this corruption later on, and that just increases their capacity in the future to begin with. Why is that bad? Because any change that you might make on a personal level is going to feel less meaningful if you're complicit in the system that is harming the people in the first place to begin with, right? I might have $100,000. I might give it to the people in my community who actually need it. But if I'm defending the bigger system, I'm harming more people on scale, because a company taking part in bad decisions harms more people on scale because of the decision making that they take part in. Which means even if I personally help some people with the money that I have, it's just something that doesn't feel helpful because I'm still complicit to the larger system which oppresses more people on scale, and that is something we think is really, really bad to begin with. But just some more rebuttals, and what does this realistically look like in our side of the world? Notice it doesn't mean that you just have to earn no money in our side of the world. As an up-and-coming lawyer, you probably have some talent, you probably have gone to a good college, which means there is some moderating influence in terms of the money that you can still earn. There are also still clients that exist in our side of the world who are not morally complicit, especially for many companies. Reputation is the most important thing for them, and they have strict, rigid structural reforms that they take part in, because a lot of companies assume that if they have good reputation, they'll just be able to earn more money in the future. You can probably work with these companies, or you can probably work with some lower tier law firms, and you can still earn some amount of money. We understand that it's probably not going to be the most amount of money, but that's something that's going to be important for you. What are the activities that you're going to take part in our side of the world? First, notice, what does public interest law activities mean? It means that you probably file public interest litigations with the Supreme Court talking about structural reforms that need to be changed, which means probably if you see a company taking part in discriminatory hiring practices, you go to the court and you call this stuff out. If you think your locality is getting less funding as a government, as a black neighborhood, you'll probably go to the Supreme Court and talk about the fact that structurally your street and your village and your locality is getting less funding. Notice, why is this more meaningful? This is more meaningful because when you call out structural reforms, even if they are less likely to succeed, the fact that you have called it out can potentially help more people on scale who are living in these localities, who are being discriminated by these people in the first place. But second, you can also defend people who are being sued illegally, or you can also defend people in terms of lawsuits and directly call out these people and get some more money from that to begin with. Let's talk about what matters to this actor the most and why our case is the most important. The first thing I want to talk about is that when you're from a minority community, you're more likely to grow up in poorer areas, which are often over-policed and which are often mass incarcerated in the first place, right? Because there are systemic barriers that you have probably gone against. The second thing to notice, as a member from this community, you have probably seen a lot of injustice and discrimination happen towards your community members. That probably means mass incarceration against Black people. That probably means them being arrested for just having an ounce of drugs, but their white overlords just didn't get arrested for something which was really, really big to begin with. But second, you have seen this asymmetric power within the legal system, which always benefits the majority community. This is why thoughts about social justice matter to you a lot, because these were one of the biggest reasons that you actually chose law as a person from a minority community in the first place to begin with. The second thing I want to talk about is why this is really important in the current context of USA. In USA currently, Trump is in power and ICE is literally taking out minorities and pushing them over the borders in the first place to begin with, which means it is an urgent situation for you to involve yourself now, because you have seen minorities systemically facing harm right now. Gov's claim is you might help them in the future. What about the people who are currently being transported over the border just because they're from a minority community? You feel an obligation towards them because they're urgently being harmed, and that is something you want to solve in the first place. I'll take a POI from closing government.
Your case is ambitious, but it's a bit silly. It's cute that you think you'll sue the US government in the Supreme Court for abusing minorities. As an up-and-coming lawyer, you just finished law school, you are broke,
Sure.
and you're
Okay.
from a
You
minority.
might just not sue them directly. What can you do? You can probably represent some victims of discrimination and take part in those lawsuits. You can still have morally legitimate clients in our side of the world. Sure, you might not earn the most money. We are okay with taking that trade-off. That is literally what our case is to begin with. But as a lawyer in this environment, it's really important for you to take part in these activities because you understand the current climate of USA and what it represents. Sure, Gov might say that US is very liberal. That's just limited to California and New York. In 90% of the areas, in suburban areas and tier 2 cities, there is active discrimination that happens against these minorities. And that is something that you want to stop in the first place to begin with. But why do you feel a big obligation towards these people? And why is this something which is really important to you? The first thing I want to talk about is oftentimes your community is the reason that you actually get to go to these law schools to begin with. It's not just your family. Oftentimes people within your locality or within your hood are the people who actually combine their resources and send you to a good college so you are able to earn the money in the first place, which means the obligation that you feel is not just towards your immediate family it's also to the community at hand, which allowed you to go to that university to begin with. But second reason, and this is crucial, oftentimes there are many systemic barriers that you face to becoming a lawyer, which means for you to break those barriers and you to become a lawyer in the first place, you needed to have a reason which was big enough that made you want to work in the first place, which means we think that as an up and coming minority lawyer who actually broke those barriers, you needed to have a lot of passion, you need to have a lot of inspiration, but you needed to have the dedication that justice is the most important thing, right? If you didn't have these strong foundations, you probably might not have become a lawyer, or you probably might have not succeeded in the first place to begin with. Why is all of this the most important thing within this debate? We think this actor is okay with not living the best life, but still contributing to the life of communities and like their life just getting better at hand. We think you feel an obligation because especially when you become successful, you understand that other people couldn't get that success in the past and you just feel that obligation. Very proud to it.
Time. Thank you for that speech. Now I would like to invite the DPM here.
Just give me a moment. Three things in this speech. First, responses to the other openings. Second, in terms of how we're better able to provide help for minorities. And third, in terms of how professional credibility is the precondition to you having valuable influence later on, therefore cementing our benefits. I'll flag my responses out as I go. But first, responses to OO. OO makes two broad claims. The first thing they say is that on our side of the house, you need to defend guilty people, and this is something that eats away at you morally. This is untrue for two reasons. The first is what Ian says. He says oftentimes the delta is in the types of law that you fundamentally choose. So for instance, even if we're talking about like, I don't know, sexual harassment or corruption, that's still criminal law and that's an area you might not go into. You have a whole wealth of options you can fundamentally choose on. You can choose a department and a law firm that doesn't necessarily correlate to these things. Things like corporate law, mergers and acquisitions, contracts, investments, real estate. You have a whole host of things you can choose from at this moment in time. We don't know why you'll put yourself in an uncomfortable position if that's not something you therefore necessarily want to do. But the second is that this holds true on their side also, because if on the outside of the house they do things like work in pro bono clinics, necessarily help minorities per se, it doesn't mean that every minority is innocent. I mean, like more innocent that, you know, like people would like prosecute them for, right? But the idea there is that they're still guilty people. And if you work in a public defender's office or in terms of public prosecution, so on and so forth, there are people who do crimes. You do have to defend them. And when you work in those firms, you don't necessarily have a say because these firms are necessarily over-cliented and understaffed, which means all the more you don't have it, as opposed to working in a big law firm where there's a variety of associates who can take over this task. The second thing that OO says is that, but we're now able to unlock those direct and proximate benefits because you feel like you have a notable obligation to community. First, this is nothing more than an assertion. Individuals go into law not just because they want to help the community around them per se, but also because, for instance, it's a way to uplift yourself out of poverty. It's a really well-paying degree. Your parents likely push you to do these types of things, which Ian also explains. I concede that this person might have some form of moral inclination, which is why they are debating this at this point in time, but I wouldn't say it's the predominant one in the way that OO can whitewash these benefits. But second of all, OO's material is contingent on them showing that they're able to solve these issues in totality, which is why the POI is brilliant. They don't explain why you're going to be able to have the resources to feel like you're making massive change in the interim. The counterfactual is far more likely going to be burnt out. So for instance, every immigrant you help stay and be unlawfully deported, there's another one lining up and another one lining up and another one lining up. And for every success you see, you will have more failures, and failures weigh more heavily on you because you feel like you're unable to discharge that burden, which is why they don't necessarily have that benefit. So at the end of the day, even if you feel complicit in something on both sides, so like on our side, you feel complicit in, I don't know, like not dedicating your efforts towards these causes, and on their side, maybe they feel complicit for not being able to do more. On our side of the house, the amount of negative emotion you feel is far less because you're but one person on the team. If it's not you, they would hire someone else. But on op, the guilt from not doing enough is deep and continuous. It eats you up inside. You feel like you're the only one who should help them. It's a life or death situation for them, and you feel you're what's in between, and therefore you should do better. Now I know you might go, but all of this material cuts against you because surely doing something is better than doing nothing. No, the difference is where you put yourself on the front lines or not, and the degree of therefore proximate responsibility you feel. I'll explain why you're able to discharge those burdens better. Then the next thing I'm going to explain is to why you're necessarily able to help provide why you're able to provide minorities better help. Forwarding social justice causes doesn't necessarily mean helping minorities per se. It looks like public interest lawyering, law reform, or counseling clients. What this fundamentally means is that you need to shift the way in which you manage clients. So if it's just about defending clients well, and being adversarial gets that too, right? Because say, for instance, if your client wants to plead guilty, even if they are innocent because they don't want to drag it out in court, you help them get the best plea deal possible. If your client wants to settle against a corporation that screwed them over because they need the money for the family and they need the money right now to survive, you tell them it's okay to settle and you get them the best settlement possible because it's in alignment with client interest. What Odd Bench has to necessarily defend is pushing clients to do things that you feel forwards your own social agenda, which fundamentally leads to significantly worse outcomes for them for two reasons. The first is that it's oftentimes not what the client wants. It's undue risk. It's delayed catharsis. They want to move on. They have more short-term proximate concerns, but you force them to do things like sit through protracted trials. So for instance, when you do public interest law and you go, let's bring this to court because it can set a better precedent in the future. We need to hold bad people accountable, and you push your moral impetus on these individuals. And second of all, you're unlikely to be able to select this well or like have empathy or go on a case-by-case basis because you're so convinced by the righteousness of your cause. You see your clients as people to be convinced as opposed to people to be listened. On weighing this is immoral for two reasons. The first is on principle. You are instrumentalizing individuals to necessarily further your causes insofar as you do things like public interest lawyering in that regard. The parallel here is we don't force people into social activism because it's a burden they need to choose to undertake regardless of how good it is for the rest of the community as a whole. The second is what I already said in response to OO. It's fundamentally speculative. It's not your job to decide if the risk is something that's fundamentally worth to your client. It takes years for a case to get to like the Supreme Court for there to be precedents. It oftentimes takes a great deal of negotiation to be able to get those same outcomes. Even if you're helping minorities, we think you should take on the adversarial model because that is what does best for them, even if you don't buy the alternative. Now on the outcome, here's how we help people and here's why we do it better. Note what I said to OO about there's no reason why one moral framework outweighs the other. So the team that therefore, like with regards to this person decision-making calculus, so the team in this round that is able to prove to you why we're able to get both those outcomes is the team that therefore necessarily deserves to win. Ian explains that your family around you made sacrifices, your community oftentimes pitched together to put in money to send you to college. You feel a direct and proximate reciprocal moral obligation to them that fulfilling provides you great catharsis for. We're not saying you can't help your community. We're saying help your community outside of your 9 to 5. Donate that money. Go to those protests. Speak to people. You can do a whole host of other things without it necessarily infringing in this regard. Before I move on, I'll take closing. Opening?
Why are you likely to do something? Why are you like to force people or force clients to do something that is unlikely to succeed in the first place? You're likely to select the cases that are likely.
The reason why you do it is because you believe it can succeed, even if it's like a 1 in a million chance. You feel like you should therefore take it, or you really believe it's right and the justice system will deliver on righteousness. There's a whole host of reasons why you might not be a great decision maker. I'm not saying you make bad decisions all the time, but making a bad decision one time fucks someone's life, and you did not have the power to make that decision. On the second point on why professional credibility is the precondition precondition to achieving other things. Here's where I'll respond to CSPOI to Ian. They go, but you're unlikely to succeed as a minority in this field, but there are a variety of reasons why you will. You're up and coming, which means you might have gone to a good school. You're probably good at your work. They're meritocratic. Ian gives you a bunch of other reasons. Affirmative actions, DEI, minority clients. Oftentimes, connection means you don't need to get top tier success. If you've seen the judge a lot of times, they have a good impression for you. Even if you're a junior partner and not a named partner in the firm, you still work with those people. There are people beside you. And even if you're never at the top, the pay in these industries is significantly more. The other people are consequently more likely to listen to you at a later point in life because you're an insider as opposed to an outsider and someone they therefore necessarily have to stand against. You can always change out later. You can have a mid-career swap. You can work in pro bono. You can do counsel work for NGOs or IGOs much later, but the converse isn't true. That's why we get both.
Thank you for that speech. I would like to remind everyone to set timers for the speaker. Please be mindful of the protected time. That being said, I would like now to invite the dialogue here.
Hi, I'll just take 10-15 seconds and then start. I hope I'm still audible and visible. POIs, I'll definitely take one from closing government. Usually take it after 5th, but you can ask whenever. Just a second, I'm setting up my timer. Also, I do record my speech. I think this is being recorded regardless, but yeah, just a caveat. I am recording my speech, so the POI you ask me will also be recorded. Cool, starting at my next word. Responses first. The person is still a smart lawyer, which means the process of choosing your cases will still be done in a very good manner, which means you're still going to choose cases which you have the highest amount of success, but also the cases which are going to represent the highest likelihood of non-guilty people. This is still a lawyer, which is an upcoming intelligent lawyer. So I'm not sure why OG is saying that you will have to represent equally morally bad people on our side. That's literally the comparative which is said in the debate. But secondly, the process of representing minorities in and of itself is a good thing. It doesn't always need to success or need to always represent the right people. Why is that? Because the type of people you work with who are not going to be racist against you, who are going to treat you like an equal, who see you as a good savior for their own community, the type of reactions people are going to give you because they're going to see, like people from your own communities are going to see you as a representation and an extension of them. These reactions dictate the experience you're going to have in your job, which is going to be far better when you're in opposition versus being a part of the very complicit system on-site government. You'll have to work within the system who's going to be very, very repressive and very, very oppressive against the communities you have necessarily come out of. This necessary process of being a part of a good working environment is achievable only on opposition, something which you have internalized, which means this flips the process of necessarily working and doesn't always rely on success. But secondly, they say that you're never going to achieve success. This is what I want to get into weighing. You don't necessarily have to succeed in every case you do on opposition. The process itself and just being on the right side is going to be necessarily good. One, being a part of good moral organizations mean you can start on your scale. As a small lawyer, you often take up smaller cases which are still very, very important morally, but the likelihood of success in that case is still very, very high. Once you're able to get multiple amounts of these cases under your belt, can you then do the next scaling up thing of fighting for the larger laws and larger narrative? That means you're still a smart person and part of smart organizations which do it according to capacity. So you're going to get success small level at small individual levels, probably in your municipality, probably in your local organization. That means it's going to give you catharsis that you are representing good people and you're also getting success from that. But second, note often this is done along with social movement. So even in instances you fail, and I take the burden, right? Social movements still co-opt a lot of pro bono cases and they represent this as a very important conversation in society. So just the initial conversation of the cause you're representing still makes you feel like it's increasing the amount of people who care about this in the first place. This instant gratification to your community is necessarily seen as an extension of your work because you represent something which is so controversial is that people are starting to converse about it and make it seem as like a very important thing, which is why people who represented George Floyd became a part of the very movement itself, which means the process, regardless of the point of success, still makes you feel good. I'm now going to do the obvious weighing, right? Why is money necessarily not the most important? Why do we still get it on our side? Firstly, mitigation. The number of opportunities on opposition is still very, very high. With so many people requiring this, with so many immigration, with the Dhruv necessarily very nicely framed, this means there are high amounts of opportunities of these cases arising in the first place, which means you can access a lot of these cases. Not all of them are going to be pro bono. Probably some of them are also going to be people who can give money, will also give you money to represent them because they need a lawyer from their own community to do that in the first place. So many opportunities means two things. One, you have the high amount of viscerality and popular. Sorry, just 1 second. My timer has stopped. Can somebody tell me how much time I've done? I'm not, my phone froze.
3.
Exactly 3 minutes, right?
Yeah.
So I have 4 minutes, 15 left. I'll start based on that. Sorry about that. Continue my speech from here in 3, 2. Wait, I'll just set up a backup timer as well. Sorry about this. Yep. Starting in 3, 2, 1. That means first, viscerality and popularity is something which you're going to regardless get on our side, but it's not only going to be based on popularity. This also gives you power, which means increased amount of power means that people from my own immediate families, which they talk about, also are seen as good individuals, which means they're going to be accepted by communities which they necessarily come out of. Secondly, more economic outcomes as well. Because there are increasing number of cases which are happening on opposition, I can selectively also choose cases which are necessarily going to be very, very good for me. This means economic opportunities are high in number on opposition as well. And this also proves because you're an up and coming good lawyer, probably means you've come from a very good university like Harvard Law, or at least a reasonably very good university from law, which means you're a very good lawyer in and of itself. This means the opportunities you may be able to get are still going to be very, very good, and it's not going to be restricted. That means the experience, the process, and the number of opportunities is still going to be very high to get the money in the first place. This also beats their weighing metric because their idea is that the most immediate impact is going to be on my family. But as long as I give them food on the table, they never explain why the quality and the extent of food I give them is going to get the gratification. As long as I'm able to take care of my family, which I am because of the reasons I've given you, we still achieve the same weighing level impact which of opening government. Nullified. Let's get to the best weighing in this debate. Why do I matter more about social justice as compared to money, and how is the internalization work? Number one, social justice is often a prerequisite to the use of money in the first place. The ability for my community or vulnerable communities who I'm going to represent, for them to spend the money depends on the fulfillment and depends on the rights they can have today. If they're going to be deported, what the fuck do they do with that money, or what the fuck do I do with the money which I have? Because I never necessarily could create the highest amount of change in the first place, which means I have seen this as a prerequisite of money. I have seen rich people in my own community suffer because they don't have the amount of equal access and equal rights in their own communities in the first place. So I have seen money being a secondary thing beyond social justice, but I'm going to take a higher burden, obviously. Second is that guilt is often internalized more as compared to money. And this is going to be very, very crucial in this debate. My own ability to be a good lawyer, which OG says is important, is going to be dependent on whether I am very, very skillful in every decision I take. As long as Dhruv proves to you, you will have to work in a firm which will require you to also work for very, very bad people and people who are oppressing your communities. I have multiple amounts of instances where I have to internalize this guilt in the first place. I have had multiple opportunities where I'll have to sit and evaluate that the person I'm representing is such a bad person, yet I am doing it. The opportunities for guilt to come up in my mind are higher in number on side government as compared to opposition. What this means, it reduces the impact of me being a good lawyer in the first place, but secondly also restricts my ability to be a guilt-free and emotionally very, very safe individual. As long as we prove guilt is something going to be much more written on our side, we necessarily weigh this as a more important metric for this individual. POI closing government. 3, 2, 1, opening government.
So I'm not quite sure why we are like defending the most evil person. Like if you're defending a company against another company and you're just making sure the contract is enforced properly.
No, I agree. I'm not saying opening government has to work for the worst individuals. My point is, you just don't know. Because you become a part of the complicit private system and the companies you work in, you are unaware and you can't challenge this. Dhruv already beats you on this. When there's power asymmetry in this organization, you can never question them on why are you giving me this client who might be morally in the bad. This is why guilt is important. When I'm unaware if the person I'm representing is good or bad, my guilt sets in those circumstances, which is what I internalize. And so lastly, the amount of internalization I've had for years in my life of seeing social justice thing is a very important thing is far more than me seeing the importance of money because of the prerequisite thing I've given you, which means when I take this decision today, this will have a far higher impact in my mind as compared to all the things OG talks about. This proves why it's more likely for me to take and better for me to take the decision of being on our side on opposition where I feel more fulfilled, impacting for the last whatever time I have left. One, it creates momentum on our side for support within communities. Note on best case or side opposition, you have to become a part of the system, which means the people from your own community see you as somebody who's joining the system, who's oppressed them, which means higher scale of impacts are possible on our side. And note this way, even one change achieved on opposition, just one, trickles down benefits to generations of communities. It trickles down generations to the community, which is most important to me. So we don't require 100 success also. Even one big change on our side can give me the highest amount of gratification, the highest amount of impact for my communities, and the highest amount of support I can get from my community. Worst backlash, one bad case on their side, my own community will leave me and like isolate me because they will feel like I've betrayed them. This ambiguity is there on their side versus clear crystal support of your own community on our side in situations where you need them the most. One, money is still going to be here. Secondly, on weighing, we win. Proud to be on over.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now I would like to follow up on the member of government. Here.
All right, it is good.
Yep.
The first frame I will push is the type of work that you're doing as an up-and-coming lawyer. At this point, you have very little money, you have very little prestige, and have to work your way up to the top. So the most important thing is to amass a huge amount of experiences that you're willing to get. So you're probably not getting the FTC and SEC work immediately. You're probably at this point doing boring paralegal work, desk work, in order to establish yourself as someone who's trusted with good work ethic within the company, who's able to turn things up on time, who's able to attend the firm and show good value. So what this often means is opening is caught in a deadlock about, well, there are smart lawyer, you can choose which cases to take on. The point is you can't choose which cases to take on because you are at a point of leverage where you can in fact say, I am a very successful person. You must in fact respect my ability to do things, because at this point, you're still trying to prove yourself in a very competitive field. The second reason why this is important is that there's a time urgency. You are a young person who rapidly wants to show that you're qualified when many other people are entering a very cutthroat environment. So what this means is you have to amass as much experiences as possible. If not, you're going to be drowned out by other people, because in a field like law, which respects seniority, eventually, if you're not going to establish yourself as someone who's very qualified and well experienced, there are going to be other 40-year-olds, other 50-year-olds who are more experienced than you by the time you turn 40 or 50. So it's often an irreversible decision that they are making on their side, because you commit to yourself a life of public service, but you can't necessarily turn around and go back to corporate law, because at that point, there are younger, fresher people who are better done with AI and stuff like that they can in fact hire to become the lawyers. Thirdly, you want to dispel notions that you're a DEI hire by showing that you can in fact make it in the workplace. When closing opposition asks, well, don't you face discrimination? It's worse when people think you are unqualified. They are being given this position on the basis that you're a minority. So the best way to dispel that notion is by getting all these experiences so you can prove that you're legit and worth it. There are two implications of this frame. First, opening government is very convenient in claiming that you can get a crap ton of money. Obviously, this only applies to you being a very successful lawyer. So what we are explaining here is the type of work that you're really doing and how you ought to posture yourself right now. But secondly, OO says some clients may be guilty, but you're an up-and-coming lawyer. You probably won't be assigned the guilty clients because as an amateur, that's very difficult for you to execute. So you probably won't be assigned those things by the law firm anyways. At this point, I want to push two extensions. First, why you can in fact avoid guilt. And secondly, why as an activist lawyer, you're subject to immense amounts of public pressure, why that's bad. First, why you can avoid guilt? Because open government says morality is very much a subjective frame, but as opening opposition says, it's easy to tell who is the good guy, who is the bad guy sometimes. So what's the problem here? Opening opposition talks about police brutality against the drug dealer, but there's actually no reason why you as a minority automatically care about this. Like, the state of being a minority is not a condition to being an altruist. In fact, it's the opposite. You probably are someone who's disillusioned with the nebulous idea of social good because you've gone through years of law school and probably realized that this is a cutthroat environment where in order to survive the bloodbath, you need to put yourself first. That it in fact has a lot of backstabbing and sabotage, and that's why you need to be able to do these things to succeed. But secondly, if on their side, you only feel guilt and shame for failing to protect minorities if you explicitly tell yourself that my career is in service of protecting minorities. If the frame of mind you enter the legal expertise in the first stage is to say, well, I'm making lots of money, maybe the same atrocities are happening with regards to the police brutality, but you don't see yourself as personally responsible for being able to change them. So on their side, you add that burden of guilt onto you, when you can see the vast majority of people don't see that as an issue that they feel like they themselves are responsible for solving. So on the other side, you become more conflicted. It's like when you get a client, you're like, should I charge them? Because maybe if they're so discriminated by society, it feels wrong for me to charge them a fee for my services. So it's oftentimes very difficult a career to go through mentally. On our side, if you're morally agnostic, you just get more cases. You can represent a wide variety of clients. Sometimes the US government, who might actually, in most cases, we see my minorities as someone who's evil, who someone always goes against their interests, but in fact can give you a really good case. Or things like corporations. Like the average person doesn't think that Facebook is an evil company, right? Like it's only a very activist frame of mind to say all these evil capitalistic corporations. So many of the things they claim are clear atrocities are only atrocities if you enter the frame of mind that you as an activist are responsible for solving all of the evils that society puts onto you, which is why you don't feel guilt on our side, because that's only a burden you shoulder if you tell yourself you're an activist. If you tell yourself you're just a lawyer and an adversarial one, and that those things don't fall on your shoulder as you being responsible to solve. The second thing I will prove is why being a public activist lawyer is just really, really bad in terms of subjecting you to public pressure. I'll be more dynamic and charitable than OG and take up at their best where you as an activist lawyer can actually be successful. Why is this bad? The first reason for this is because there are very few public activist lawyers. So when you as a prominent person from the community gain success, you tend to be framed as the community as a hero, the one who stood up for us. But that being thrust into a public spotlight opens you up to scrutiny. Look at the Trump era where he's attacking a lot of public interest firms because Trump knows the judiciary is the one place where he can be disproven, where he can be attacked. So when he, for example, he tried to attack the Harvard College and whatnot, then it was the judiciary that in fact pushed back against him and gave him the lack of legitimacy. But you may think, if Trump is so opposed to you, doesn't that apply symmetrically? No, because on the other side, you frame yourself as a public activist, which opens you up to more fire attack from Trump and other people who want to go against these public interest firms. Just respond to Diallo, who's saying it's a high amount of cases, but these opportunities are rapidly disappearing because in this current American landscape, a lot of those public interest firms are going away. But the second part of this is just your community may not necessarily view you in a good light all the time. Look at the example of Thurgood Marshall, who was the first Black US Supreme Court justice. He was hailed as a hero for the African American community. But sometimes you can't always act in the most moral and Puritan ways. Sometimes the sexual assault victim doesn't have enough evidence. So legally speaking, we can't help them, even if altruistically it might be the right thing to do. So when you fail your community, you gain the fury of those people because they don't understand the intricacies of law. They think it's a binary black and white, so they blame you for all the failures that you face. But before that,
As an upcoming lawyer, your power is limited on both sides initially. At least you don't have the guilt of representing bad clients and working with possibly bad people on our side.
No, my point is, you don't necessarily see those people as bad unless you have to put yourself in a frame of mind and saying, I am the hero. I am here to discharge all evil from society, because it's never your burden to distinguish between good or evil. You're a morally agnostic lawyer who is following the law, helping people be not in chaos. And so in your side and on our side, it just makes it much easier for people to just do their job. But the second part to this is in many cases, you may actually be blamed for taking the social justice route, because in the US, a law career requires a lot of money, a lot of time, often requires more than 6 years of studying. And as a minority, you've probably taken a lot of public debt. Your parents probably invest in you a lot. When you yourself are struggling to get the foot in the door, you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, because as we say, this is a path that does not often walk. So when you're struggling, you're unable to see where your efforts are leading up towards. It's very difficult to see yourself as doing any justice on their side. As opposed to on our side, when you get more consistent corporate law firm work, specializing like tax and contract law, you get paid incrementally for the good stuff and the money can motivate you. Again, a lot of the motivations are what you set yourself up for. On their side, you set yourself up for trying to change the world. It's very difficult and oftentimes subjective. On our side, you focus on yourself. You don't open yourself up to public scrutiny, and that's amazing.
Thank you very much for that speech. And now I would like to invite the member of opposition. Here.
Hi, am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Great, thank you. POIs in the chat, please. Starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. This debate is about upcoming lawyers deciding which environment to work, whether you are likely to work for adversarial lawyer or whether you're likely to work as activist lawyer. I think the problem of opening government and opening opposition is that they rely on the assumption that on either side of the house you would succeed, i.e. you would succeed in opening government and you would be a partner named lawyer in a top firm in America, whereas on opening opposition they rely on the assumption that you would be able to win the case. We on closing opposition is going to prove as to why those lawyers are able to actually acquire the ability for you to win in those lawsuits, while you're able to become successful activist lawyers on our side of the house, and disprove on their side of the house why it's likely that these minority lawyers are likely to fail while they're trying to climb the social ladder, while they're trying to promote on their side of the house. So that is the extension coming from closing opposition. I'm going to explain why you're likely to fail as a corporate lawyer and why you're able to acquire those ability to succeed and ability to win those lawsuits on our side of the house. The first thing I want to note here in terms of this argument is that law firm that you're likely to get in as an upcoming lawyer, the first law firm that you're going to get in is likely not to be the top tier law firm on their side of the house. Because note, oftentimes the fact that you are coming from minority backgrounds means that you are less likely to have the connection to be in those top tier law firm. You're less likely to come from a prestigious university like Harvard or Stanford or whatnot. That means, and these sort of credentials is a prerequisite for you to get into the top firm in New York, in the top firm in Los Angeles, for instance, and it's likely that you don't get into the top firm law firm in a highly competitive place. So even if you're going to become a corporate lawyer, for instance, the best law firm they're able to get in from a minority background is likely to be in a law firm that is that is from the second tier or the third tier law firm. On the other hand, on their side of the house, you're likely to get into the top tier class action law firm on our side of the house, simply because obviously there's less competition among those upcoming law firms who wants to go into those class action law firm, given that obviously it's unpopular compared to corporate law firm. But second of all, I think you as an individual coming from minority backgrounds probably have stronger incentive compared to other lawyers to work for class action suits, for instance, to serve for people coming from minority backgrounds. Why then being in a top tier firm in that sector is something that is crucial. The first thing is that the quality of the case that you get is going to get much more better, which means you're more likely to work on tougher case that will grow your ability, that will grow your tactics and how you should deal and win those tougher case, for instance. But second of all, more crucially, you're going to have better boss, for instance. You're going to have better subordinates. You're able to know the standards and what it takes for you to have to win the case and to do a good job as a lawyer. And this is really critical because as an upcoming lawyer, as a person who have never actually work in that law firm and law sector, for instance, you never know what kind of standard it requires for you to work and for you to win the case, for instance. You never know what kind of research you should do and how much research you should do. You never know what kind of tax that is required for you to win the case. Being in a top tier law firm, being able to learn from your bosses and subordinates is really critical for you to understand and acquire this top standard way of doing the job, and this is really critical. On their side of the house, at the point that you won't be able to get into those top tier firms means that you're unable to get good cases, but secondly, you're unable to acquire those good abilities for you to win and get promotions, for instance. But second of all, I think you're less likely to get good case in those law firms on their side of the house. Because first of all, obviously, you don't have good connection with your boss, for instance. You're not coming from the same, a university, for instance, so you can't have those chit-chat that would make your bond stronger with your bosses, for instance. But second of all, I think subconscious biases do exist even under status quo. This is, direct engagement to opening government where they say it's 2024, it's liberal. No, subconscious biases do exist under status quo. The fact that you come from similar backgrounds, for instance, will make you trust much more of that person, for instance, and in the long run, this compounds. But third of all, I think the fact that in these sort of more competitive backgrounds, that means that there's going to be less slots for you to work on cases because there's more competition. Excellent young lawyers looking out for good cases do exist on their side of the house. It's really competitive for you to get in a good case in their side of the house. That means if you're unable to be in a good case, for instance, you won't be able to work with your good, subordinates or bosses, for instance. At best, you're going to do research on precedent cases, for instance, which is obviously a bullshit. On the comparative on opposition side, you're more likely to be allocated to good cases, for instance, that would grow your ability to win the case and work on the case, for instance. So obviously, first of all, there's lack of human capitals. There's a lot of class action suit that is waiting to be handled, for instance. But second of all, I think obviously you have stronger dedication to work on their cases, and bosses do understand that, and therefore they're more likely to allocate you on those cases that requires huge dedication and longer working hours, for instance. But third of all, I think you're much more able to get promotion on our side of the house because first of all, I think signaling effect of those promotions do exist. As a class action law firm, for instance, it's better for you to for the law firm to have a minority backgrounds lawyer to be in a higher position as junior partner, for instance, and therefore those those law firms do have the incentive to put you on a younger age to be in junior partner or senior partner, for instance. And this is really critical because obviously responsibility makes people grow. Being in an extreme condition, being on the front line to have a tough negotiation with the upcoming corporations, for instance, simply grow the ability for you to win the case and to handle the case entirely. On Gov side, obviously competition is more likely to exist. Layoff is normal because there's new competent lawyers coming in every every year, which means probably on their side of the house, even if you're
Last
on
chance.
A, it's likely you're likely to get fired, for instance, because there's going to be a lot of upcoming stronger lawyers. But second of all, I think even if that is not the case, you're unable to get promotion. What is the conclusion here? It is likely that those people will grow much more on our side of the house, have the ability to win the case, to get good case, to get promotion much more. This is about which company these lawyers should choose as his first firm, and the most important thing that they should acquire when and thinking about which firm to go is the reputation, is whether they could get reputation for this, whether they're able to get ability to succeed. Obviously, the reason why we go over opening half is, as I have explained, we talk you as to why they are able to fulfill the incentive that they had before we solve the deadlock of opening half. But second thing I want to note here is why he has to select the job as its first job. Because opening government said you are able to do that on both sides. After you become a junior partner, you're able to do pro bono. But we think this is not the case, because first of all, I think expertise knowledge for you to work on class action cases is completely different from when you're working on corporate case, which means that obviously at the point that you work on a corporate case for 20 years, it's really hard for you to catch up with the class action lawsuits from, for instance. But second of all, you probably can't take pro bono in those big law firms. So obviously, first of all, it's really highly competitive. You don't have time to do so. And from all of these reasons, that is the only way in which you're able to do those minority cases. Very happy to oppose.
Thank you very much for that speech. Kind reminder for everyone to set up their timers. Speeches are 7 minutes up to 7:15. Now I want to invite the government whip. Here.
CEO's extension is an explanation of why you will fail as a corporate lawyer. Problematically, nothing in this motion binds us to defending you getting into corporate law. This motion is about being morally agnostic, but you're not agnostic to other things. So this is not a choice between good and evil. It's a choice where good and evil don't matter as much, but other things still do. So you still have interest. So maybe if you're interested in corporate law, you end up in a corporate law firm, but you probably have other interests that are not necessarily social justice aligned. This is what Umar's critique of the OO tries to point out, which is there is a presumption that by virtue of being Black, or a presumption that by virtue of being queer, everyone cares about being woke and everyone cares about social justice. But the reality is people can be dynamic. People are three-dimensional. People can have interests outside of saving the world. This is precisely what explains why it's not necessarily the case that you are either wholly evil according to the CO or you are wholly good and altruistic. They give you a number of mechanisms as to why you're probably better off in their boring class action law firm. The first thing is they say your first law firm isn't a top tier law firm, whereas there's lower competition in firms that deal with class action, and that in these firms, you're more likely to be on the front line, and this is good for your growth. Two problems. One, it is bad to throw new lawyers into difficult cases. They are likely to make mistakes. And crucially, if you fuck up on their side, if you fuck up while you're on the front lines, one of two things is the case. A, everyone can see you. It's a very small law firm as per their concession. So there's much more opportunity for scrutiny. Unlike if you're in a massive corporate structure where it's difficult to see the moving parts, the individuals who are responsible for making mistakes. But more importantly, if you make a mistake on their side, you will never forgive yourself, because the consequence of that mistake is, for example, George Floyd's murderer getting off scot-free. On our side, maybe you'll make a mistake, but the mistake is the contract doesn't get written properly. You forget a page number, you forget an ampersand and something like that. There is no guilty Black people, there are no innocent Black people who are going to jail by default on our side or the risk of that happening. They then say class action firms are better because A, you learn more. I will note many social justice firms are often constrained in their focus. So in the US, Earth Justice is an exclusively environmental firm. The Southern Legal Resource Center is an exclusively Black socioeconomic justice firm. What this means is, by virtue of being involved in these woke law firms, you are necessarily constrained in your focus. You only take cases about Black people. You only take cases about the environment. On our side, you're much more expansive. You're free to take cases from a range of disciplines, a range of areas, and so on. They then say you have better bosses on their side. The mechanism here is a hallucination. Why is it the case that your boss at Earth Justice is necessarily better than your boss at Linklaters? Probably on their side, your boss is probably really, really busy because, like they said, you're understaffed. These are really small law firms. So your boss doesn't even have the time to mentor you in the way that they want you to. Unlike on our side, where because of the abundance of employees within these mega law firms, you probably have someone who's willing to take some time to drink coffee with you. The last thing is they say you won't get good cases in corporate because corporate cases demand connections. The opposite is true. Again, if you're in a small law firm where many people are applying, for example, probably the only way that you get admitted is by virtue of knowing someone. And because you don't know someone by virtue of being an up-and-coming lawyer, you probably don't get the job in CEO's world. The first thing OO does is give you some actual analysis as to the types of cases you will get. The first thing they say is you'll be coerced into representing the worst clients because you're at the bottom of the ladder. The opposite is true. You're actually more likely to be given the safest cases, the easy wins, where the evidence is mounted in favor of your clients. 2 reasons why, which is 2 more than they give you. Hey, big cases are fun and partners want them and they will take them. They're challenging, they're stimulating, and so on. Second, big cases come with a lot of prestige and attention. So Robert Kardashian during the O.J. Simpson trial, people like Karen Friedman Agnifio, who's representing Luigi Mangione, obviously the partners in the law firm want to have all this attention on themselves so they can get even more people rather than putting this attention on a junior lawyer. Crucially, we flip this. If you're given the worst clients, like let's take O at their best, this is probably good for you. You get challenged more as a lawyer, you're able to improve, you develop as a legal thinker, and so on. They then say you're worried about contributing to the system that oppressed you. I would wager most minorities don't live with a wider awareness of the oppressive system. Most minorities aren't woke. The structural reason is that they're the ones who most desperately need to believe in the delusion of the American dream, or of Christian nationalism, for example. They believe this because they need to, because if they don't, they will drown in their own despair. This is why Mexican Americans, for example, famously vote Republican, why Black men in the US are famously the most homophobic demographic, that sort of thing. They then say you feel a duty to benefit your community. Guys, Black people don't all live in woke socialist communes. If you tell your community you declined the chance to work in big corporate law and to take them out of the wood in the name of your flimsy fucking morals, they will feel betrayed by you. The best example of this is actually one I think most people in this room, as Asian and other types of POCs, would relate to, which is most of our parents want us to become like doctors and lawyers and engineers because they've invested so much money in us. Such that when I tell my mother I want to do a PhD in anthropology, for example, she's very upset because she's thinking, I invested so much money with the expectation that you would take us out of the wood, and now you want to do this silly degree. This is obviously going to be something that frustrates your family. They say this is especially urgent given the threat Trump poses. A, Trump has been gutting at woke law firms. You will end up unemployed and no one will want to touch you with a long stick. But 2, exclusivity. If you start off morally ambiguous and then later commit to being moral, this is a more palatable social shift than the opposite. Because if you start off as a woke lawyer on their side and then end up pivoting towards evil lawyers when you end up unemployed, obviously this is a really bad look for you. Before I talk about the last thing on OO, yes, go for it.
As a young person, you have probably seen intense discrimination happen. Oftentimes, your strongest ideals and values are formed at the youngest age, which shows you are not morally ambiguous, but you do care. On our side, we beat you on the framing.
So this is the thing I was saying earlier, which is nothing about this motion says you are a minority by virtue of being, for example, the poorest of the poor. You could be Black and a minority, you could be like queer and a minority, and so on. These are not necessary conditions for having a social justice mindset. Their last thing is to say activist lawyers are woke and they won't call you a slur. A, this doesn't make sense. Your application to a firm is a filter. So if a firm is racist, they will just never take your application to begin with. You're not at risk of being called a slur by them. But 2, I'm not sure why you should believe social justice firms are inherently woke, because inequality is axial. So maybe you work for an environmentalist firm, but your boss is homophobic or something else of that sort. Finally, on the gov bitch, OG says that they think this is in your family's best interest because you make more money. Crucially, this is not exclusive to being adversarial. OO's response is reasonable, which is that bread and butter are what matter to your family, not you being a millionaire. We do the big thing here, which is to explain how to be a minority lawyer, you have to be exceptional. This means your family has invested a lot of money into you and they know you have extraordinary potential. They have been dreaming about the ways in which you will take them out of the wood only for you to not do so. They'll be very upset with you. Secondly, they say representing minorities is tactic. But the real delta here is not the mere fact of representing fellow Black people, but publicity. That you are a heroic lawyer in the mind of people and that there are huge standards that people expect you to live up to. And you're always worried about not living up to those standards at some points. Finally, they say you're adversarial, you get more money and connections. This is also inexclusive for reasons explained to you by Umar. Propose.
Thank you very much for that speech. Now I would like to invite the opposition with here.
Am I audible and visible?
Yes, you are.
Okay, perfect. Just let me sort out my notes real quick. My speech will start in 3, 2, 1. I would first start with one observation. There is a deadlock in the opening half of whether money or achieving social justice is more important for this actor. We see that both sides give good enough reasons, and the truth is both incentives are probably equally important to this individual. But then the question that ultimately arises at the end of this debate is which side can achieve both incentives better. And from CO, we say that we are the side that proves that you can achieve that best of both worlds uniquely on our side of the house, and that's the reason why we win today's debate. I think I'd like to first talk about money, and then second, money and success, and secondly, talk about social justice. First, on money. We first, in our extension, proved to you why you're actually likely to succeed as a lawyer on side opposition, right? What are the responses that we got from closing government? The first response that we got is that, you're likely to be a new lawyer. If you're a new lawyer in the front line, you're likely to face things like failures and more scrutiny, and therefore you're unlikely to succeed. First of all, you're literally still a newbie, right? So I think your bosses don't have incentives to actually put you in the front line and make you responsible of all these important cases to begin with. You're still likely going to have at least one supervisor that's always there to help you out in the first place and teach you new things because they want you to grow and actually succeed the own company. But secondly, even if you do fail in the worst cases on their side of the house, I think people in general, scrutiny isn't going to go towards you. It's more likely going to go to the supervisors or the people or your bosses that are in the same case that are more responsible for the case to begin with. So therefore, it's unlikely to directly hurt your reputation, and it won't really actually harm your success to begin with, right? And the second thing that they talk about is bosses are worse to begin with, but I don't really think that's the case. I think that still, bosses still have large incentives to care about you and teach you a lot of things at the end of the day. Therefore, you're still the core analysis of a lot of our case hasn't been responded to begin with. But to give you a bunch of other counter reasons as to why you're still likely to succeed on side opposition, right? First of all, I think you have your company actually has active incentives to promote you as your corporate lawyer because they're a woke company. They care about minority issues and those kind of things. So they want to use you as a signaling effect that they care about minority issues, and they hire these kind of really good lawyers from minority backgrounds. Therefore, you're more likely to get promotions in the long run, right? But secondly, you're also much more likely to win cases to begin with, right? Especially related to minority individuals, because when minority individuals see that you as a minority lawyer is representing them and representing them in court, I think they're much more likely to open up to you and give you trust and actually, give you all the testimonies and give you all the background details that are important for you to win a trial to begin with, right? Therefore, you're actually likely to succeed even more on our side of the house because you can win more trials and actually climb up the social ladder at the end of the day. What is the comparative? Why are you unlikely to succeed on side government? The only response, and we gave you several reasons, as because these kind of companies are very competitive and you face things like discrimination. What are the responses that we got from opening government? The only responses that we got are, DEI exists and minority clients exist, so there's still a demand for you as a lawyer. I think first of all, this is unresponsive because more competition is still going to exist within the same minority groups, meaning that you have a less chance of succeeding within your minority group as well. But secondly, we say that we still deal with this large case because subconscious biases still exist within your bosses, right? And what this means is that they're less likely to give you important cases that are meaningful for you to actually train even more, or meaningful for you to actually gain the expertise and reputation to actually succeed and get more money at the end of the day. And because you are unable to do this, I think the likely scenario is that within these corporations, you're not going to get so much promotions, you're not going to be represented, and maybe even laid off in the worst case, right? What are the implications and at the end of this clash? I think first of all, we had proved to you on our side of the house that even if your firm doesn't make much money as corporate laws to begin with, you're still likely to work in in the best firm within these industries. You're still likely to get large amounts of promotions at the end of the day. So even if you're not going to initially get huge amounts of money, in the end of the day, you're relatively going to be well off. But secondly, even on side government, there's no guarantee that you're actually going to constantly make large sums of money at the end of the day, and therefore the margins in money is probably very marginal, even if it exists at the end of the day on side government. Moving on to independent rebuttals to OG and CG. First with OG. What did OG basically tell us? They told us, in addition to all of these things, that, you're not going to get fulfillment or you're going to face things like burnout because you're going to face more failures on our side of the house. I think our extension uniquely engages with the point because we provided you why you're likely to succeed within these firms, and therefore you're still likely to get fulfillment at the end of the day. But the other weird, interesting argument that they gave us is that, you're going to push clients to go to these, trials, and therefore, you're instrumentalizing people, and therefore that is bad. First of all, I think think you as a lawyer, like, actively, can distinguish which cases are likely to succeed and not. Therefore, it's really unclear to me as to why it's very likely for you to, force clients to do these cases or represent these cases that is unlikely for you to win in the first place. But even if that is the case, we see that there's different means to disperse the burden at the end of the day. You can do things like class actions. For example, you can use different kind of minority people to do testimonies at the end of the day. I don't think that the burden at the end of the day is significantly large at the end of the day, right? So therefore, I think OG, I responded to other extraneous OG matters. Moving on to CG, I think first of all they talked about because once you succeed on our side of the house, I'll take you later. Even if you succeed at the end of the day, you're going to get scrutinized at the end of the day, and therefore that's bad. First of all, I think that community still exists around you on our side of the house to support you. Therefore, you're still going to get lots of support even if you face scrutiny. And we said that secondly, supportive people are more proximate to you. People at your house or people within your workplace are more important to you. As long as they're supportive, I think criticism from random people on the internet doesn't really matter. Secondly, they also talked about you're not necessarily going to go to corporate law to begin with. First of all, this is knifing their opening. But secondly, if you're morally agonistic, I think it means that you care more about money, so you're more likely to go into corporate law. Actually, sorry, I don't have time. Moving on to the second issue at the end of the day. Why can't you achieve social justice on-site government, right? We say that as an upcoming lawyer, first of all, because there's so much competition within these corporate law firms, I think you often have to do things like overworking, where you have to do all-nighters to prove your worth and get those promotions on their side of the house. So you don't have time to do things like pro bonos. Secondly, you're subject to pressure from bosses and colleagues not to do pro bono because they want you to be more productive and work for the law firm even more. Therefore, you're going to face these kind of pressures and therefore unable to do things like pro bonos on their side of the house. But even if Gov says that, once you get to the top of the ladder, and you have all these experiments, you can still do that at the end of the day. First of all, competition still exists even in the long run. But secondly, the fact that you chose corporate law actually locks you out in representing and achieving social justice for your minority groups, right? Because you can't engage in human rights trials, even if you especially only know about the corporate law to begin with, because your specialty is completely different. You can't ultimately, achieve social justice on side government at the end of the day. So therefore, I think that because side government can achieve social justice and we can achieve the best of both worlds, I think we win this debate. Why do we win over OO? I think first, our extension proves why we can achieve social justice better than opening opposition, right? Because you succeeding is the prerequisite for you to achieving more social justice for your minority groups. But secondly, I think the only mech for opening opposition that to prove why they gain more success is because there's a large demand. I think the fact that for you to get large demand is also hinged upon you succeeding to begin with. For all these reasons, very proud.
Thank you very much for that speech. Congratulations, everyone. You will be